And we're looking at an obituary of a person who is supposed to be dead but isn't dead and is related to the DeVoe family. Um, I knew Elisa DeVoe that attended Pembroke Academy, and they work for the Department of Transportation, and they are involved in kidnapping my daughter, using probate fraud. And there's definitely something shady about that school. And so this is just a recap that this person essentially got away with probably faking his death. He's also used the name Robert Marlin, and you can find that out pretty easily. It's this Nil ran backwards, actually, is Marlin. And you'll find all kinds of companies, shell corporations that he runs out of Miami, Florida. Like Nil Rim Incorporated out of Florida. There was some also in Santa Monica, not that far from where Whitey Bulger was, and Russell Moving Company. Um, so these people have something definitely shady going on. Plenty of shell corporations, and of course, shell corporations are not necessarily illegal all the time, but there's definitely something wrong with this family, and they're definitely not who they say they are. And they didn't just steal my child, they also took another boy who, at the time, I was not aware that he was a possible cousin. And now that boy has been recently found dead in a river, named as a victim. But I don't know what the further findings on as to how he died. But there have been threats on my daughter involving the DeVoes and also Thomas Aaron Clark. And this family definitely needs an investigation. But there's another company also. This is a lawsuit I filed on them, but they continue to cover this whole thing up. And this guy may be involved in a securities fraud, asset freeze, involving the Martins, certain Martins or Browns, also involving gold mining in Costa Rica. They weren't actually doing it, they were just stealing money in stock, at least 13 million. They claimed to have refined gold and black sand beaches of Costa Rica when in fact they were not engaged in any such business. What other business they might have been involved in is, there's room for speculation there. But, and we'll get onto that later on, but, so these people have some kind of link to, since 1988, been under pending civil action. And I want to know how these people are getting away with essentially holding my daughter hostage, probably drugging her. She probably has Stockholm syndrome from these people. I'm sure there are other complicit parties. They probably lie to schools. But this is not. It all stems really from one school, and that's the high school I graduated from, called Pembroke Academy. And another one. So we want to look into something about Pembroke Academy that I hadn't really kept track of for several years because I haven't lived in the state in over a decade. And this is interesting. There was also identity theft. But it was very complicated. Not only did Thomas Aaron Clark use multiple names, but so did Robert Noram, his wife, um, other people that they were associated with, an illegal immigrant involved with that Crisa group, uh, for filing a Human Rights Commission complaint against them through Kirby dealership. It's called DeRozan Associates. So this is a pretty complicated mess. But Rika Luther, an Australian Indian singer-writer, apparently there's another woman using that name at Pembroke Academy, and you can look her up. I don't know her personally. It did not make national news until parents found out. The school tried to keep it hidden from parents. But she was involved in bringing heroin and steroids and I guess even fentanyl on school grounds with needles. I wouldn't be surprised if there's far more going on. Live to the court. So this is a really serious matter because the school board actually originally covered up her arrest and tried to keep it quiet, and parents found out about it. But it didn't make national news until a little bit later. In fact, almost 2 years later, when she was originally arrested in 2016. But she was the dean of the school. That's pretty sad. Head deans using and probably running drugs. And I do think that there was another woman also, Heather Maria Rayum, who was also targeted along with me by these people, by an Osbert Mado, who was a music producer, and he was filed on. So there's a number of people involved in this. It's a pretty big mess when it gets like that. But even look it up. That's in the news. But I mean, parents had to. They tried to cover it up at the school. I mean, what is going on with these people? But I'm wondering if there's a Rika Luther in Australia, if this woman is using a fake name. And it would explain a Benjamin Fitzgerald from Australia involved in the matter and also involved in covering up this whole mess. And even after, for a while, she actually remained the dean of school. See, this is way back in 2016. She finally did get a resignation, obviously, because parents found out about it. But it's pretty sad when a school covers it up. This school has some really odd, shady connections. Even, well, I guess we'll go to White Page and we'll look her up. And we'll show you what I mean. If you remember the Securities Exchange Commission report on that company, and you'll find that similar names are on that list. as that company. Not all of them. Martin, which was, by the way, Martin Company that held the Nil Room and the Knit Room group that they had. Brown. I find it interesting that the Osgoods are on here too. I knew a Benjamin Osgood that attended the school. So this is really a big scandal. What are they covering up? There's something far more going on in this school. And it's more than just a few syringes by one teacher. Somebody needs to investigate this high school, because this is not normal. Why is somebody that might be tied to a drug cartel in a school, in a high school, a small high school, not a very big one, a little one. It's in a suburb of Concord, New Hampshire. It's not part of the Concord School District, though. And I'm not saying that these same Browns and Martins are related, but it's worth looking into. And is she using a real name when other people associated with her have been involved in identity theft? And one of those individuals that I had filed a complaint involving DeRose and Associates in New Hampshire. One of them was an illegal immigrant. I didn't know at the time. And you can see that Yates prosecuted this case. Holder prosecuted this case. And obviously I was kept out of the details for several years that this was all involved. And another Pembroke Academy student that I had known, who also knew Mr. Thomas Clark, her husband also worked at Kirby, Merton Doobie, and so they were probably upset I filed a sexual harassment complaint on him, and they, lo and behold, found that they were employing illegal immigrants. Not only that, Mr. Mapunga actually got in trouble in the UK too, as well as Canada. And he had fake passports on him. So we have definitely identity theft associated with this, and this man was also working for Bakrisa Group in Africa. He's originally from Tanzania, and from what I understand, there were other members there, another one by the name of Kevin Lamontagne. I guess he had a friend who went to jail for heroin trafficking. So I do think that this is linked all to this mess. And they also tried to obstruct justice. With the Laconia Police Department. And again, I have never lived in Laconia, and this was only local news. And so, you have here, this was the trial of Kenton Giuliano. He's actually the son of the investigator in my case, Roxanne Giuliano. And what's interesting is you have a possible case where they may have actually falsified the evidence just to get back at the investigators on this company or those companies for an ICE investigation. And this went on for several years. And then the woman here, I don't know her personally, Lindsay Vanderhoof, knew the Garretts. But if you scroll down here, you can actually read that Thomas Clark, the same Thomas Clark, involved with the Don Taylor, Noram, Teresa Taylor, and also the Perrys. A few people actually I know, Rich and Nolan, were all in on it together. you can see here that they were all near the Taylor home, and it was the Taylors that stole my daughter. So as you well know, there's definitely an obstruction matter going on. This should not have gone on as long as it did at all. And around the time that this investigation had also been pending, I had briefly worked with the Consulate of New Zealand. Not directly, but for a contracted company. Now, I wasn't there, so I can't say that he committed the arson or not, but it's suspect that they probably falsified the evidence. Maybe, maybe not, but it does seem kind of odd that Roxanne Giuliano's son, a head investigator with the United Nations Office for Human Rights Commission, would be involved in bizarre criminal activities. But Lindsay Vanderhoff also knew Catherine O'Russell, the wife of Tamerlan Snarev. So that is a big mess and should never have happened. And now the other boy that they took has been found dead in a river due to the cover-up of this whole matter. But you can see that for a while that they tried to kind of hush her arrest away until the parents found out. And another girl that was involved, yeah, that's right, Heather Maria Rayum, married Justin Rayum, and is an indirect relative to Benjamin Burnley on the wife's side. I did not know the girl that well, and I had only talked to her a couple times. She worked for the Gold Club in Bedford, New Hampshire. She was an exotic dancer. From what I understand, she'd also been hired by Sully Erna in the Godsmack band when I had met her, but I really didn't know much about her or anything like that. And apparently, they also were drugging her and probably a whole other things. So this is not, this is a big deal. It's pretty widespread what's going on. And she's even linked to a Utica meth lab. So this woman should never have been in charge of any school. And oh, by the way, Lisa DeVoe, who I've shown is connected to this, also is part of a Franklin school town board. So you have people now on school boards possibly linked to drug trafficking in the state of New Hampshire. Pretty sad. Outright pathetic. But you can see here too, way back, 2016, New Hampshire School Defense staying quiet about Dean's heroin arrest, which is ridiculous. I mean, this woman is a danger to children, a bad example to high school students, which are very impressionable. All right, lots of teens get involved in drugs, so you know she's probably doing other things. I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, even the superintendent, Patty Sherman, shame on her, would be notified if the headmaster resigns, but probably not if the dean leaves. So in other words, they wouldn't even notify the parents. I mean, this woman had a whole bundle of hypodermic needles at the school, all belonging to this woman. Now, if she had a whole bundle of hypodermic needles at the school, you can bet she's not the only one using them, and that she's probably doing other things with other students. She should be investigated thoroughly, and that school needs to be investigated thoroughly. Another shady thing with NILREM too is out of Fall River, Mass. And this is, you'd be surprised. And this is an old case, way back, involving a charismatic Gnostic church. I found that out later on, run by John Paul Paroli out of Massachusetts. Had a link to Satanism. It was probably during the time of the Satanic Panic. Of course, they were probably just murderers, but still very odd. And Pembroke Academy had a number of satanic clubs as well. I wouldn't be surprised if they have links to this or to a group similar to it, or maybe even the OTO or the Temple Set, maybe. But they basically murder prostitutes brutally, right out of Fall River, Massachusetts. And from what I understand, the NILREMs are also, some of the family members are involved in these kinds of groups. I'm not saying that they're involved in murdering people, but it's certainly suspect after a boy drowns in a river, after they had acquired him by possibly by under acts of duress, as they tried to do with me. But I think the Caters were involved in that, and I know that the Caters knew John Paul Paroli. And so you have a really weird mess going on. Some of it could have been made up, but they might have just been involved in murdering people. Either way, they were crazy. A long time ago, but I guess that woman is out of parole. And some of her family members may live in Pembroke, in New Hampshire, Massachusetts area. But either way, Pembroke Academy is a shameful school. They need to be investigated very thoroughly, because something far more than just one woman, Dean, is involved in running drugs. And I wouldn't be surprised if other faculty are involved in this, which is absolutely pathetic. In fact, Mr. Clark also had a child by another girl that also attended Pembroke Academy, Sabrina Morin, maiden name DeVal, married to the Coreys. And she's also involved in covering up the trafficking of my daughter too. They like to pretend that they're all not in cahoots within each other. One acts bad, the other, but they're all part of this. And it really needs to stop. These people need to go to jail. This school needs a very serious investigation. Because something far more than just one teacher with a bunch of hypodermic needles and heroin, fentanyl, and steroids is involved in this. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's even a real name. I don't even know if it's a real name. With all the people involved with fake names, who's to say anymore? That's it. Well, wait. We'll look at the other boy. And it's very brief in the local news of Lewistown, Pennsylvania. If it'll load, please load. And you can see this is the local news for the Lewistown, Pennsylvania borough. It's very brief. Um, I don't know if it's on here or not. I guess it's not. I don't know why it didn't load. We could see it in there. There we go. May 29th of 2020. But they're claiming, hold on a minute, we'll take a look at this. Authorities have identified the body recovered from the Juniata River Wednesday. Mifflin County Coroner Dan Lynch identified the victim. I want to make it very clear, the victim as 17-year-old Isaiah Nilram. The search for Nilram began Tuesday evening when the teen disappeared from a group of swimmers in Granville Township. So the boy disappeared and was missing for several days. Now, this is a boy that was allegedly forcibly adopted under Richard Hampe out of New Hampshire, who also, they too, stole my daughter under Richard Hampe out of New Hampshire when I no longer lived in that state nor in that county for over a decade, and stole her from California while living in Pennsylvania and acquiring fraudulent papers from Arizona. And the guardian ad litem that they used, Lenora Bain, has relatives that are Nazi war criminals. These people need a serious investigation. And why they are getting away with holding my daughter like this is ridiculous. The papers aren't even signed. I have other videos up on it. So you can see here that they did not identify his body until May 29th, or find his body until the 29th of 2020. If we go back, you'll read his obituary. That he died on May 26th of 2020. Now, I know the Juniata River is a fairly good-sized river, but, I mean, he had been outside most of his life or fishing camp and things like that. He would have been familiar with the area. Of course, anybody could have a drowning accident, but these people have threatened my family and all kinds of other acts, even with Thomas Clark threatening and alluding to murdering my daughter for life insurance policies, and I have copies of those emails. So this family needs to be investigated, because I would place him as, since this paper says he was a victim, I would place him as possibly murdered, and that somebody is definitely lying. In fact, even the fundraiser, and unfortunately because they kidnapped my kid and held her for 8 years, she has Stockholm syndrome. He went by the nickname of Izzy. But they're saying they have no money. For funeral expenses, probably because their asses have been frozen for 30 freaking years, that they're tied to that same corporation that was defrauding Costa Rica as well as the U.S. So and I already showed you the articles and what they found. and we have a different story, completely different than what the newspaper and the obituary says. When he went to go swimming, now this is during COVID lockdown, by the way, and they were in Mifflin County, the red zone, so they shouldn't have been really out and about, but that's beside the point. They can get fined for that, but she says that he lagged behind and then he went under. Of course, I have writings from my daughter saying he had an asthma attack, so the story keeps changing. But yet we have 3 days lapse before they even found him. And so I think that they're lying. And I think that his family needs to be investigated. I've about had it.